Imagine a train loaded with tons of cargo, millions of kilograms of steel and freight passing over the earth. If we place this terrifying weight directly onto the soil, the ground would collapse, the rails would sink, and the train would derail in mere moments. This is where these stones, technically known as drag ballast, come into play. Think of the railway as organized layers. At the top, we see the steel rails resting on wooden or concrete sleepers, which in turn rest upon a thick layer of these stones. Their function is simply to act as a massive cushion that takes this enormous weight and distributes it calmly over a wide area to prevent the ground from compressing. But before we dive in, if you're new to the channel, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe. However, there is an incredible secret in this design. The rails you see are not fixed to the ground. Yes, they literally float on top of those stones. There are no bolts anchoring the track to the depths of the earth. Instead, it relies entirely on the weight of the stones and their friction against one another to stay in place. This remarkable flexibility is what allows the track to absorb the violent vibrations of the train instead of snapping under the weight of accumulated pressure. Now you might ask, the stones support the weight. But why this specific type of stone? If you ever tried to pick up a piece of railway ballast, you would notice something immediately. You would find it to be sharp, jagged, and very coarse. In fact, you will never see smooth, rounded pebbles under a railway track, and there is a very clever engineering reason for that. Imagine if you tried to walk inside a pit full of smooth glass marbles. You would slip in every direction, right? Smooth stones do exactly the same thing. They roll over one another. If a train passed over rounded rocks, the stones would roll away due to the vibrations, causing the track to fall apart and slide out of place in seconds. For this reason, engineers choose crushed stone, usually hard granite carefully broken, to have sharp edges and angles. The secret here is interlocking. When these jagged stones are pressed together under the weight of the train, they do not roll. Rather, their sharp edges dig into each other to form a solid mass that does not budge. Yet, despite all this rigidity, they still retain a very small degree of flexibility. Enough flexibility to stabilize the track and prevent it from sliding sideways even as the train passes over at maximum speed while swaying through curves. But do not think that the mission of these stones is limited only to carrying weight. They are, in fact, fighting a daily battle against the two greatest enemies of the railway, water and weeds. Imagine if we laid this track over a layer of cement or ordinary soil. What do you think would happen? Of course, during storms and heavy rain, soil would turn into mud, washing away and leaving the tracks suspended without support. Cement, on the other hand, would trap water on its surface, creating puddles that cause the rails to rust and deteriorate. Here, we discover the genius of these stones. They are not just rocks, but a giant drainage system. When it rains, water immediately flows through the gaps between the rocks and away from the track, keeping the ground dry and solid beneath the train regardless of the storm's intensity. Then we come to the weeds. Let me ask you a question. Have you ever noticed that the center of a railway track is always clean? It is very rare to see plants growing there, and the reason is that this thick, sharp layer of rocks makes it impossible for any roots to push their way down. This is vital. If roots were to grow, they would break up the soil and destroy the foundation supporting the track. Simply put, these stones, which might look random to us, are actually a weight-bearing foundation, a drainage system, and a smart barrier against vegetation. Three tasks performed simultaneously to ensure that the iron giant passes safely every single time. Now for the final detail, which is, in my opinion, the most exciting part of this story. Why are these stones called by such a strange name like ballast? The surprise is that this name wasn't born on land, but came from the heart of the sea. Centuries ago, when old wooden ships sailed empty, they were so light that they became unstable on the waves. They would sway violently and could capsize at any moment. To increase their weight and stabilize them, sailors would fill the bottom of the ship with very heavy stones to provide balance. And this weight was called ballast. When the ships reached port to load new cargo, they would dump these stones in massive piles on the shore because they were no longer needed. When early railway engineers began searching for cheap, strong and heavy materials to stabilize their new tracks. Their eyes fell upon those piles discarded on the beaches, and they thought, this is the perfect solution. Thus, trains adopted the weight of ships to secure their paths, and the name has stuck to them to this day. A story that began in the oceans to secure trade routes and ended beneath train wheels to secure our daily journeys. The next time you stand waiting for a train and catch a glimpse of those gray, jagged stones beneath the rails, remember that they are not just ordinary rocks or decoration. They are, in fact, a silent engineering marvel brilliant at draining water, fighting weeds, and carrying heavy loads. They are what have kept our world moving on the tracks for over 100 years and continue to do so today. Honestly, before this video, did you ever imagine that the giant train we ride actually floats on stones and isn't attached to the ground by a single bolt? Share your thoughts with me in the comments. We have now reached the end of the video. Thank you for watching.